Hello friends. Earlier this week in the previous session we were talking about the programs and policies related to water supply, and in this session we will talk few more programs and policies on other aspects like groundwater abstraction, irrigation, all those things we will be covering in this session. So, to begin with, the groundwater programs and policies in India were again like largely considers that groundwater is a property of the one who owns the land. However, there has been notifications or there has been recent court judgment which says that the deep groundwater is a property of state or property of government. So, until unless these ambiguities are removed, because if I own a piece of land and the groundwater beneath is my the groundwater beneath my land or the land that I own is property of the owner of the land. However, when the court says that that is only for the shallow groundwater, the deep groundwater belongs to the state, but until unless it is further clarified like how deep is the property of state and what is the way, there has been actually lot of issues related to the groundwater. Earlier we discussed some of those. So, in judiciary, if you see, the judiciary actually have given certain decisions where it restricts the abstraction of groundwater when there is when the groundwater abstraction causes depreciation in the water table in someone else's territory. So, I own a piece of land, I am abstracting groundwater from that, I have right to abstract groundwater because the groundwater beneath the land I own is my property, but as per the right to life or right to hold the properties, I should not be intervening into the other's territory. But if I do excessive pumping in my land, obviously the groundwater table is likely to deplete. Now, if groundwater table starts depleting, it will affect the neighbors field also. So, there is possibility of the groundwater depression in someone else's territory. Now, Supreme Court has given a decision onto that, judiciary has given a decision onto that, that depreciation should not extend to the territory of the other people. But it is very difficult to monitor how this depression can be stopped from moving in from territory of ones to another. Anyway, coming on to the programs and policies, the groundwater Central Groundwater Authority, which is CGWA, was constituted in 1986 by under section 3 of the Environmental Protection Act. The idea was to regulate and control the development and management of groundwater resources in the nation. This CGWA is regulating withdrawal of groundwater by industries, by projects in over 802 over-exploited and around 170 critical assessment units. So, this these are identified as over-exploited aquifers, over-exploited groundwater resources or critical assessment units. The CGWA has notified around 162 critical or over-exploited areas in parts of National Capital Territory, Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Andhra, Rajasthan, MP, Gujarat, West Bengal, also various states for control and regulation of the development of the groundwater resources. For enforcement of the regulatory measure in these areas, concerned deputy commissioner or district magistrate have been directed under section 5 of the Environmental Protection Act of 1986 to regulate groundwater development in these notified areas also. So, the power has been basically given from the CGWA, it has been the power, or one can say the responsibility, has been given to the concerned deputy commissioners or district magistrates in these areas, these critical or overexploited areas, to look for how much groundwater abstraction is taking place, what is the effect of this, whether it is against the norms or it is well within the permissible reasons. So, these things are being explored, and overall monitoring is being done by the Central Groundwater Board. Further, the construction of new groundwater structures is prohibited in these notified areas. So, one cannot straight away like dig a well or put a pumping station for pumping groundwater in these areas. They need to have appropriate approvals beforehand. The permission of drilling tube wells is being granted only to the government agencies responsible for drinking water supply. So, particularly in these notified areas, it is the government agencies which are responsible, the municipalities or local bodies, panchayati raj institutions, those who are responsible to ensure the drinking water supply. So, special approval is being granted for withdrawing groundwater to only these state or these government agencies for withdrawing groundwater for the purpose of drinking water supply. Otherwise, generally the groundwater abstraction has been stopped. To enable the state to enact on a groundwater legislation, a model bill to regulate and control development of groundwater has been circulated by the Ministry of Water Resources to all state and union territories. So, Ministry of Water Resources and of course, now it has renamed Water Resources and Ganga Regeneration. So, this has it was the model bill was circulated earlier, that time it was referred as Ministry of Water Resources only. So, they prepared a model bill for regulating and controlling the development of groundwater, and that bill was circulated to all state and union territories. However, few of them have accepted and enacted accordingly for implementation of the groundwater legislation. So, Andhra, Goa, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, West Bengal, Himachal and union territories of Lakshadweep and Pondicherry has accordingly, as per the model bill, they have enacted and implemented the policies and legislation related to the groundwater. Various other states have their own groundwater policies and act, like UP has its own groundwater policy and act, MP has its own, Maharashtra, Rajasthan. So, many of the states have their own regulations, not only in respect to the groundwater, but in respect to various other things, and they are authorized to do so, they are powered to do so, because as per our legislation, as per our constitution, the water is a state subject. So, state can have those kind of specific regulation differing from the central. Central cannot be an enforcing agency until unless the constitutional amendments are made. So, when the central cannot be an enforcing agency, it can just recommend or it can just suggest, it is up to states to accept that or not. So, many states follow the guidelines or follow the suggestions driven by the national status, which is come from the center government, while many states have their own local issues, local challenges, and they make their regulation, their policy which is suitable to that system only. So, in that sense, many actually do not follow the instructions from the center related to the policy and management of the water resources. The role of central as per constitution is limited primarily to the dispute management only. So, apart from groundwater, there are irrigation programs and policies have also evolved from time to time. Since independence, states have enacted irrigation laws and generally follow the pattern of the British rule. So, what was there in the colonial period in the British rule, that has largely been followed. However, right after the independence in 1950, International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage as a NGO, non-profit or non-governmental international organization was constituted, and its headquarter was in New Delhi, India. It has an objective to enhance the worldwide supply of food and fiber for all people and improving water and land management and the productivity of irrigated and drainage land through the appropriate management of water, or giving the policy decision, because it was a private body, so it cannot manage these things, but it used to basically from time to time provide suggestions, do those kind of studies, and in a way acting as a support basis for the management of water environment and application of irrigation, drainage and flood management techniques. Later on, in fact, on the same line, a government agency was also formed. There has been in between, there has been various irrigation programs and policies came from different states. So, Rajasthan Irrigation and Drainage Act, which maintains the right to state to determine whether surface water is to be used for irrigation or drainage schemes, or it has to be basically for public purpose. They have the Madhya Pradesh also has its Irrigation Act back in 1931, which was maintained, okay, and they framed a regulation of Waters Act in 1949, where all rights of the water was reserved by the state, okay, and a natural source of supply. There are similar practices were retained in the Bihar Irrigation Act. So, the different states have their own different acts related to groundwater, related to surface water, related to irrigation policies, and in fact, in the line of the National Water Policy, which was in 1992, the earlier one, and then 2002 and 2012. So, this in the line of National Water Policy, the many states have their own state water policy. Like UP has its own state water policy, then there is a Maharashtra state water policy, Bihar prepared a draft in 2009 and around 10 for its state water policy. So, the different state have their own water policies, and that basically put forward the rules and regulations for the irrigation programs and policies as well. So, in the line of that international NGO which we were talking just couple of minutes before, the Indian National Committee for Irrigation and Drainage was also set up by the Ministry of Water Resources, Government of India in 1990. So, this was rather a government body. The earlier was NGO, but this ICID, which is Indian National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, was a government body set up by the Ministry of Water Resources, Government of India, and the role of this was the coordination of various activities, including collaboration and compilation of the information and data, its publication and dissemination of information and activities in the field of irrigation, drainage and flood management. So, this was more focused onto the irrigation purpose. However, the earlier committee was on water supply, irrigation, flood, drought management, all those aspects. So, this committee was interested with the work of appraisal and monitoring of research and development schemes funded by the Ministry of Water Resources. So, this is the committee which looks for the research and development schemes in the area, and it has drafted a report of state irrigation acts, many of which are available on the website of the Central Water Commission. So, the review of different state irrigation acts, what are the policies adopted, what are the challenges, what is being done, what is lacking. So, all those kind of this ICID has reviewed the various state irrigation acts, and these reviews are available on the website of Central Water Commission. So, like it reviewed the UP and Punjab, which is available in one volume. So, there are several volumes of such reports are available, and those who are interested can go actually and access the website of Central Water Commission and ICID. So, they will find these details on the website. In the recent times, the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana or the Prime Minister's Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which is also called, so PMKSY, was formulated in 2015 with the vision of extending the coverage of irrigation to each and every field. So, there was slogan on Har Khet Ko Pani. So, that means the water should reach to each and every field, and also aiming the improving water use efficiency. So, there was another slogan like more crop per drop. So, each drop should be utilized in such a fashion that it can give the optimum crop production, it can be utilized for optimum crop production. Okay. So, that was the slogan more crop per drop. So, under this Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, there was it was basically in a focused manner planned for end to end solution on the source creation, distribution, management, field application and extension activities for irrigation purpose. And the idea was to bring each and every agricultural field under the some sort of irrigation facility. So, this was formulated amalgamating various ongoing schemes. So, there was accelerated irrigation benefit program by the Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Regeneration. There was integrated watershed management program IWMP of the Department of Land Resources and the on-farm water management program of the Department of Agriculture and Cooperation. So, all these was amalgamated, and this Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana took its shape based on these things. The total budget allocation for this scheme is rupees 500 billion in a time span of 5 years, which is to be spent for the purpose ensuring that the coverage of irrigation extend to the entire nation. There was another interesting project per se was river interlinking, which was first proposed in 1980 by the Ministry of Water Resources in its National Perspective of Water Development document. However, nothing has been done. In 2002, the Supreme Court of India gave its recommendation on a public interest litigation case, so that government should think or complete the linking of rivers, and they sort of gave a timeline also that it should possibly be done by 2014. Of course, it has been passed and we have not been there, but still at least the discussions resurfaced back in that phase. The Prime Minister at that point of time, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, was also in very much favor of this interlinking project, and he sort of encouraged this thing, and that time it started taking a shape. So, interlinking project has been split into 3 parts: a northern Himalayan river interlink component, a southern peninsular component, and intrastate river linking components. The project is being managed by India's National Water Development Agency, NWDA is actually looking for the river interlinking project, and which is comes under the Ministry of Water Resources. The rationale or the idea for the river interlinking is that in our country, because there is a vast variation in the availability of water resources and the nature or the type of rivers that flow. So, we see that some parts of the country are facing water shortage while other parts are under flood, okay, with lot of excess water. So, if the interbasin transfer could be arranged, it will be possible to export water from the basin with excess water where there is a flood situation or difficulty to store water or problem related to the high flows. So, the water could be basically taken up from those basins and it can be exported to the basins where there is water shortage, where there is not much of water available. So, this will help capture and sort of storing rainwater also. So, actually this project has multifold objective. It not only because the rivers will be typically interlinked either by the canal system or by the subsurface structures. So, a huge storage capacity will be built under that, because if one is basically laying down long canals, so there is a huge capacity develops for the storage of the water. So, when there is a flood in, let us say, one part of the nation and you have a canal linking system, so the water can be diverted to the canal which flows to the drier region and water could be supplied to the drier region. So, that was the idea. The project was to promote the big dam building and coincides with the World Bank view that India still has relatively little capacity to store water and major investment are required in small and big projects including large dams. So, that was the World Bank opinion and in river interlinking project also, because if we want to store the water, we as a nation, if you see that we receive the maximum precipitation in the phase of just 3 months, in the window of some 2 to 3 months. That is the time when we get the maximum rain of the entire rainfall, around 80% or even more than 80% comes in span of just those 2-3 monsoon months. Huge volume of water in just 2-3 months, and we do not have adequate capacity, adequate ability to store it, it will likely to basically flow and creating flood in some regions and eventually find its path to the sea and become unusable. Now, if we create these storage structures, the water can be stored in the form of canals or can be stored in the form of reservoir, those kind of system. If we make, let us say, big dams, so a lot of water can be stored there and it could be connected to the regions of drought. The first memorandum of agreement was made between UP and MP, which was signed in 2005 to link Ken and Betwa rivers. Initially, some states such as UP, MP, Haryana, Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu were in support of scheme, while various other states such as Kerala, Bihar, West Bengal, Punjab, Chandigarh, Assam were actually in the oppose of it. However, with time some states further came into the favor, some put through their conditional support. So, those kind of things were taken care of. This is what you see here is the proposed interbasin water transfer links for Himalayan component, where there are 14 such projects have been proposed. Okay. So, these are the proposed linking of the rivers, the red lines that you see over here, and these includes your Kosi, Ghagra, Kosi, Mechi, Gandak, Ganga, Ghagra, Yamuna, Sarda, Yamuna. So, all these links are there. Some connects 2 rivers, some connects more than 2 rivers, okay, like this Jogidhara, Teesta, Farakka, Sundarbans. So, all these link connections under the Himalayan component of the river interlinking project are there. The red ones that you see over here is actually the links for which the feasibility report has been completed, while there has been feasibility report under study or under preparation for various other links. Some of these more would have been completed. This is the proposed links for peninsular components. So, there are again around 16 rivers, 16 links which are to be put through. So, Mahanadi, Godavari, Godavari, Krishna, and then Godavari, Krishna, 2-3 different places, Krishna, Amravati, Krishna, Pennar. So, all these Ken, Betwa. So, these like interlink projects are out there, and for most of them the feasibility report has been completed. So, these are the sort of status of river interlinking project. Although idea was to complete by 2014, but it has still not been completed, while the current government has basically allocated a large fund for this river interlinking project, and probably the serious efforts are being made in this direction. Further, we have, when we talk about interlinking rivers, there are issues with the rivers which go cross country. So, water cooperation with neighbors in if we see in India, so we are under Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan. So, this leads to the establishment of permanent Indus committee and the division of the river and its tributaries between India and Pakistan. With Nepal, India shares 4 key rivers. So, Kosi, Gandaki, then Karnali and Mahakali are the rivers, and it is under some sort of agreement for water sharing or for other projects for all these 4 rivers, out of which Kosi has been a sort of in some sort of dispute, the water sharing agreement of the Kosi with Nepal claiming that they are not getting the adequate share of the water and India is getting the larger share. However, it has to be seen in a holistic approach, like what is the population in the catchment of the river in India and what is the population in the catchment of the river in the Nepal. So, accordingly the divisions should be made. Anyway, the agreement was for sharing water of the Kosi was first established in 1954. It was further revised in 1996. Mahakali river water sharing agreement was also made in 1996, and largely there is no dispute on Mahakali. Few other rivers were in some sort of agreement or memorandum of understanding or MOU for Gandak irrigation and power project agreement, which was done back in 1964, and more recently the upper Karnali hydropower project memorandum of understanding was made in 2008. We have several other MOUs with Nepal for water governance structure issue, like the development of barrage near Tanakpur. So, all those like things are there where joint operations are being done. With Bangladesh, India actually shares some around 50 rivers. However, the major focus has been major attention has been given to the Farakka barrage. The India Bangladesh made a joint river commission in 1972 to look after the shared rivers between India and Bangladesh. The Farakka barrage received the highest focus from both the countries, and they signed a treaty on this in 1996 for sharing water in the Farakka barrage. There are no concrete water course agreement with China, although we share some of the water resources, and China being in the upstream, India actually depends for water in some of the rivers from the China. However, in 2002 a memorandum of understanding was signed for sharing the relevant information on transboundary rivers related to the water abstraction and all that, including Brahmaputra, which is one of the major river that connects India and China. But in general there is as such particular treaty and this kind of concrete agreement is not there between India and China. However, we should have one because it is of very high importance. The China few years back proposed to made a dam. Now, if they make a dam in the upstream and withholds the water, India is going to suffer a lot. So, India should basically come forward in this and try to get into some sort of treaty with China over the sharing of waters in their transboundary resources. This is of very high importance, particularly from because we are already on the verge of water stress, and further stopping the flow in our rivers from the upstream will actually deteriorate the situation even more. So, we end this session over here, and we will discuss some of the other related issue in the last session of the week after this. Thank you.